My name is Eliza Carter. I'm 28 years old, and it's 2023 here in London, United Kingdom. My father used to say, real success doesn't come from sitting behind a laptop. To him, my career in digital design was a hobby, not a job. He had his empire, his offices, his business lunches, and his gold-plated nameplates. And me, I was just his daughter wasting time on a computer. But time has a strange way of rearranging pride and power. Because when his empire crumbled, it was my so-called pointless job that kept us both alive. CTA, call to action. Before you judge, stay with me till the end, because what happened next changed both our lives forever. And if you love stories of redemption and poetic justice, don't forget to subscribe for more like this. Chapter 1, Part 1. They say London teaches you humility, especially when it rains. And that morning, the sky looked like it was holding back tears. I was sitting in my small flat in Shoreditch, eyes fixed on the glowing screen of my MacBook, finalizing a client's brand identity project. The coffee beside me had gone cold hours ago, but my heart was warm with quiet satisfaction. The project was for a small eco-startup, nothing fancy, but it paid the bills and kept my creative fire burning. And just as I hit send, my phone buzzed. Dad. For a second, I hesitated. He rarely called, and when he did, it wasn't to ask how I was. Hello, I answered cautiously. Eliza, you busy? His tone carried that familiar impatience, clipped and businesslike. Just finished a project. Why? He sighed. I've got a board meeting in an hour and your mother's not home. You think you could come over? There's something you should see. That was it. No explanation, no warmth, just a command wrapped in polite phrasing. I didn't argue. Because despite everything, the arguments, the dismissals, the you'll understand when you grow up lectures, part of me still wanted his approval. The Carter house stood in West London, the kind of place that looked more like a statement than a home. Tall hedges, stone lions, and windows that reflected arrogance better than sunlight. When I entered, Dad was in his study, surrounded by shelves of thick financial books and award plaques that hadn't been dusted in years. He didn't even look up when I walked in. Close the door, he said. I obeyed. He finally turned, his sharp blue eyes scanning me the way a boss studies a late employee. I've been going over some things, he began, tapping his pen against a folder. Our company's facing temporary setbacks, nothing serious, just a liquidity issue. You wouldn't understand the technicalities. He said it casually, like the word temporary could hold up a collapsing empire. I might understand more than you think, I said quietly. He gave a short, dismissive laugh. Eliza, you design logos for Instagram brands. This is corporate finance, entirely different world. That sting hit deep, not because it was new, but because it was routine. Still, I swallowed it down. So, what did you want to show me? He leaned back, folding his hands. Your cousin Oliver's just joined the firm. I'm thinking of making him assistant director next quarter. I blinked. Oliver, the one who barely passed his degree. Ambition matters more than grades, he replied sharply. He's got the mindset, unlike... He paused, as if choosing whether to finish the insult. Unlike someone who's still freelancing at 28. Silence, heavy, thick, awkward. I looked at the man who had taught me how to ride a bike, how to tie a tie before school plays, and wondered how he became this stranger who measured love in achievements. Dad, I said softly, just because I don't fit your version of success doesn't mean I've failed. He raised an eyebrow. Success pays taxes, Eliza, not dreams. That line, success pays taxes, not dreams, would echo in my mind for months. That night, I went home and opened my laptop again. I stared at the glowing screen, the world of color palettes and typography suddenly feeling fragile. Was I really wasting my life? But when my next client, a small bakery owner, sent me a message saying, Your design brought us more customers than we've ever had, I smiled. Because even if he couldn't see my worth, The world out there could. Months passed. Autumn came, then winter. The leaves turned gold, the sky turned gray, and something else turned quiet. Dad. His calls grew shorter. His tone sharper. Even Mum sounded tense when she called. Then, one Sunday morning, my phone buzzed again. Mum, Eliza, your father's at the hospital. Chest pain. They think it's stress-related. I dropped my mug. By the time I reached St. Mary's, the smell of antiseptic and fear filled the air. Dad was lying in a bed, tubes and monitors around him. He looked smaller, not physically, but spiritually. When he opened his eyes, his pride flickered for a moment before melting into something softer. Eliza, he said quietly, they said it's anxiety, not a heart attack. I nodded, forcing a smile. You scared us. He didn't answer, just stared out the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. Later, when Mum stepped out, he spoke again, voice low, almost ashamed. Do you ever regret not joining the company? I turned to him. Do you ever regret not believing in me? He didn't answer. 2 weeks later, it happened. Carter and Sons Limited, the empire my father built brick by brick, went bankrupt. News spread fast. Market crash, they said, bad investments. But deep down, I knew it was pride that cost him the most. He refused to adapt, refused to go digital. While the world moved online, he stayed buried in paper and boardrooms. And now, the house in West London was up for sale. Mum called me in tears. Eliza, we might have to move out by next month. The bank, she couldn't even finish. That night, I drove back to the house. Dad was sitting alone in his study, empty shelves, unpaid bills scattered across the table. His suit was still pressed, but his hands trembled as he held a glass of water. When he saw me, he tried to straighten up, as if pride could still hide failure. You shouldn't see me like this, he murmured. Maybe this is how I was meant to see you, I replied softly. He looked away, jaw tightening. I've failed your mother, the company, everyone. I took a deep breath. You haven't failed me. He looked up, eyes wet. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. I can help, I said. My freelance business has been doing well. I saved up enough to cover the bills for now. His eyes widened. You're paying my bills. I smiled faintly. From my pointless job. He looked like the ground had shifted beneath him. For the first time, he had no comeback. Days turned into weeks. He started joining me in the evenings, watching quietly as I worked on my projects. At first, he didn't understand half the things I did, the design software, the clients, the creative chaos. But slowly, curiosity replaced judgment. One night, as I finalized a digital branding proposal, he asked, So companies pay for these? Sometimes more than they'd pay for a full-page newspaper ad, I replied. He whistled softly. Wish I'd known that before the world went digital. I smiled. I tried to tell you. He chuckled, a rare, gentle sound I hadn't heard in years. And then one morning, he handed me a folder. I've been thinking, he said. If you're open to it, I'd like to start again. A smaller venture, online consultancy. You handle design and branding. I'll handle logistics. I blinked. You want to work with me? He nodded. I think I've spent enough years underestimating what I don't understand. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever get, and it was enough. Weeks later, as we sat together in my small Shoreditch flat, working side by side, I realized something. Redemption doesn't always come with grand gestures. Sometimes it arrives quietly, through understanding, through shared screens, through humility. He still struggles to say, I'm proud of you, but when he brings me coffee during late-night edits, it's there, unspoken but real. And yet, as peaceful as things seem now, a letter arrived this morning, one that could change everything again. It's from an investor, offering me a solo opportunity abroad. One that could take my career to new heights, but might mean walking away from the man who finally learned to stand beside me. What should I do? The letter sat on my desk like a quiet storm. A single page, a single sentence. We would be honored to have you join our design collective in Amsterdam. Amsterdam, the city of art, glass bridges, and second chances. It was everything I'd ever dreamed of. Independence, recognition, a chance to build something that was entirely mine. But across the hall, in the small living room of my flat, my father was making tea, carefully, awkwardly, still getting used to my cramped kitchen after decades of marble counters and imported coffee machines. I folded the letter, and my heart folded with it. That night, we had dinner together, spaghetti, my version of it anyway. He'd started coming over twice a week, helping with small business plans and pretending he didn't burn the garlic bread. There was a strange comfort in it, as though the universe had given us a second draft of the same story. "Clients going well?" he asked, glancing up from his plate. "Better than expected," I said, twirling pasta between my fork. "Actually, I got an offer today." He smiled faintly. "A new project?" "Not exactly," I replied. "A job abroad." The fork froze midair. "Abroad?" His voice softened, but his eyes narrowed, the way they used to when he suspected I was about to change something big. "Amsterdam," I said. "They want me to join a digital design collective there. It's huge, Dad." Silence filled the room, heavy but not hostile. He set the fork down. "I see," he murmured. Then, after a pause, "And when would you leave?" "They want me in 6 weeks." He nodded slowly, as if each second of silence was a battle between pride and fear. Finally, he said, "That's impressive, truly. You should be proud." His words were calm, but his hands were trembling. Later that night, I found him sitting on the small balcony, staring at the London skyline. The city shimmered, glass towers reflecting streetlights, the hum of buses, sirens in the distance. A city that never stopped moving, even when hearts did. I joined him, wrapping my cardigan tighter around my shoulders. "You don't have to say anything," I whispered. "I know it's sudden." He shook his head. "No, you've earned it, He sighed. "I'm not sure what I'll do without you around." That sentence felt strange coming from him, the man who once said I was too soft for the real world. Now he sounded like the world had softened him. Over the next few days, I caught him avoiding the topic. Whenever the word Amsterdam came up, he'd change the subject, asking about groceries, whether anything else. It was both sweet and heartbreaking. One evening, I returned home to find him at my desk, staring at the letter. He looked up, startled guilt flashing across his face. "I wasn't snooping," he said quickly. "Just reading." "I know," I smiled gently. "What do you think?" He hesitated, then said, "I think they're lucky to have you." A pause. "But I also think you might be walking away from something you've only just begun to fix." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "Eliza, we only just found our rhythm again. I don't want to hold you back, but..." I interrupted softly. "You're not holding me back. You're the reason I can finally move forward." He looked at me, really looked at me, and in that moment, I saw every unspoken apology in his eyes. Days turned into countdowns. I started packing small things, sketchpads, external drives, a few design books. But every box I filled felt heavier than it should have. And one afternoon, while reviewing invoices, Dad said something that made my chest tighten. "Eliza," he said, "I've decided to relaunch Carter and Sons. Smaller, leaner, fully online. A consultancy this time." My eyes widened. "That's incredible. When did you?" He smiled shyly. "Been thinking about it for weeks. Thought I'd surprise you, but..." He hesitated. "I was hoping you might design the new branding." I froze. This wasn't just a request. It was a bridge built from years of silence and pride. "I'd love to," I said softly. And I meant it. Over the following weeks, we worked side by side again, this time as equals. He'd scribble notes on paper. I'd translate them into sleek visuals and clean typography. There were disagreements, laughter, late-night takeaways. For once, the house didn't echo with expectations. It breathed with collaboration. But every so often, I'd glance at the envelope from Amsterdam still sitting on my desk, like a ghost waiting for closure. One rainy Sunday, as I finalized the logo design, he came up behind me. "That looks brilliant," he said. There was real admiration in his tone. "Thanks," I murmured. He placed a hand on my shoulder. "You've built something beautiful here, Eliza. I just hope you don't have to leave to realize it." The rain tapped against the window, like a metronome of time running out. That night, I couldn't sleep. My thoughts tangled between past and future. London and Amsterdam. Father and freedom. So I wrote a letter, not to him, but to myself. "Dear Eliza, you spent years trying to be seen. Now you are. But sometimes, to grow, you must let go even of the people who finally learned to hold you right." I folded it and placed it next to the Amsterdam offer. And somehow, that made the choice feel closer and harder. The next morning, I found Dad in the living room, reading an old family photo album. He smiled faintly when he saw me. "You used to draw on every picture, remember? Gave the dog sunglasses, Mum a superhero cape." I laughed. "Guess I've always been into design." He closed the album gently. "Maybe you were meant for this all along." Then he looked up, voice quiet, but steady. "Do what your heart tells you, Eliza. Don't stay for me. I'll manage." I wanted to believe him. But the truth was he wouldn't. Not yet. The following week passed like slow thunder. My Amsterdam coordinator emailed again. "Flight tickets ready, just confirm your date." Meanwhile, Dad's consultancy was about to launch, and we were hours away from releasing the website. He didn't know that the same day his business would go live, my plane was meant to take off. Launch morning arrived. We were both at the dining table, laptops open, coffee mugs steaming, eyes half awake. "Ready?" he asked, smiling nervously. I nodded. "Ready." He clicked publish, and just like that, the new Carter consultancy went live. The site gleamed with clean lines, elegant colors, our vision. He exhaled slowly. "You did it." "No," I said, "we did it." And for the first time, he pulled me into a hug. A quiet, genuine one. No words, no pride, just presence. Hours later, while he took a nap on the sofa, I quietly slipped the Amsterdam letter into my bag. I walked out into the chilly London afternoon, raindrops catching the edges of my coat. Each step to the station felt like walking between two lives, one built from healing, another waiting to begin. My phone buzzed. A text from him. "Dad, forgot to tell you, proud of you, kid. Whatever you choose, make it yours." I stopped in my tracks. For years, I'd begged the universe to hear those words. Now that I had them, they felt like both a blessing and a goodbye. At the station, the train to Heathrow hummed quietly. I stood on the platform, suitcase beside me, heart split open. In one hand, the Amsterdam ticket. In the other, a printed version of our new company's first client proposal, his signature and mine, side by side. Rain misted the air, blurring the lights. I looked down at both papers, then up at the horizon where the tracks vanished into fog. And for the first time, I realized redemption isn't about staying or leaving. It's about choosing with peace, not guilt. The train doors slid open with a hiss. I stepped forward, and the screen cut to black. The evening air hung heavy with drizzle, that soft, silvery kind of rain London is famous for. The train platform hummed with murmurs, footsteps, and the distant chime of departing carriages. Eliza stood there, frozen, her suitcase beside her, the glow of the overhead lights painting her in shades of quiet confusion. Her phone buzzed again. Dad. The same number that had once meant approval, guidance, or laughter, now only brought silence and hesitation. She stared at the screen, a missed call. Another message followed. "Dad, Eliza, I know you're upset, but I need to see you, please." The words felt heavier than the rain. For a man like him, proud, stoic, unyielding to right pleas, something had changed. Eliza exhaled, almost whispering to herself, "Now you need me." The last announcement echoed through the speakers, "Train to Manchester departing in 5 minutes." That was her cue. The job offer waiting there could change everything. A new studio, her own team, creative freedom. No more judgment, no more pointless career remarks, just space to grow. And yet, her heart wouldn't move. She thought of the day he'd laughed at her dream. Digital design. What will you do? Draw cartoons for a living? He said it with that smirk, half disbelief, half disappointment. She remembered how she'd swallowed her pride, how she'd kept working late nights anyway, hoping one day her success would speak for itself. And it did. But the victory didn't feel sweet, not when she saw him losing everything. Meanwhile, across town, Richard Carter sat in a quiet house that didn't feel like home anymore. His company's nameplate was gone. His office keys returned. For decades, he had been the man everyone respected, confident, powerful, untouchable. Now the silence mocked him. He replayed the words he'd said to Eliza years ago. "Real success doesn't come from screens, Eliza. It comes from building something tangible." But what had he built? A company that collapsed, a name that no one remembered, a daughter who had learned to love him from a distance. He rubbed his temples, his eyes stinging with exhaustion. Then he looked at the one photograph on the table, Eliza at 16, holding her first design sketch, smiling. He remembered that night. He'd barely looked at her drawing before dismissing it. Now he couldn't stop staring. He whispered into the empty room, "I was wrong." Back on the platform, Eliza checked the time. 3 minutes left. She could almost see her future forming in the mist ahead. New city lights. A studio filled with laughter and art. A place where she didn't have to explain her worth to anyone. But a small voice inside asked, "Is freedom worth it if forgiveness is left behind?" Her train hissed as it prepared to leave. She stepped closer. The doors slid open. A rush of warm air met her, a promise of new beginnings. Then another buzz, a voice message this time. She hesitated before pressing play. "Eliza, I don't deserve your kindness, I know. I've been proud when I should have been grateful. I'm not calling because I expect anything. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. You were right all along. Your work, it wasn't pointless. I was the one who didn't see its worth. I didn't see you." The platform blurred. The rain turned to tears. She sank onto a nearby bench, the suitcase handle still in her grip. The sound of the train pulling away echoed like the end of a chapter she wasn't sure she could close. For the first time in years, she realized she wasn't angry anymore, just tired of carrying the pain. 2 days later, she stood at her father's doorstep, the same door she'd once slammed shut in frustration, the same one that had stayed unopened through years of silence. When he opened it, Richard looked smaller, not physically, but in spirit. The proud posture was gone. His eyes were soft, almost fragile. "Eliza," he breathed, as if her name itself was forgiveness. She didn't speak at first. She just looked around. The house that used to smell of expensive cologne and leather now smelled faintly of dust and regret. "You look tired," she finally said. "So do you," he managed with a faint smile. "Work keeping you busy." Eliza crossed her arms, her tone careful but not cold. "Busy enough to pay bills that aren't mine." He nodded. "I heard about the Manchester offer." She raised an eyebrow. "You still have your ways of finding things out." He chuckled weakly. Old habits, hard to let go. A silence followed, the kind that carried both weight and warmth. Then he sighed. "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm proud of you, Eliza, truly proud. You've done everything I couldn't imagine." Eliza blinked, unsure how to process it. The words she had waited her whole life to hear, now they came too late, yet exactly when she needed them most. "Why now, Dad?" she asked softly. "Why did it take losing everything to see me?" Richard looked away. "Because I thought success made me strong. Turns out it just made me blind." That night, as they sat together for dinner, just soup and bread, it felt like time had bent backwards. No business calls, no tension, no judgment, just two people learning how to speak again. "Do you ever wish you done something different?" she asked. He looked thoughtful. "I wish I listened more to your mother, to you, to life itself." Eliza smiled faintly. "Then maybe you're finally learning." He chuckled. "At my age, that's saying something." There was a pause, the kind that didn't hurt. Then she said quietly, "I'm not staying, Dad. I'll help you get things in order, but I need to live my life too." He nodded slowly. "I understand." Then he looked at her, not as a child, not as a disappointment, but as a woman he deeply respected. "Just don't let forgiveness keep you from your freedom." Later that night, Eliza sat by her old bedroom window. The rain had stopped. London shimmered in reflections. Her sketchbook lay open, a design she'd been working on for years. Two hands reaching for each other but not touching, a symbol of love and distance, pride and forgiveness. She picked up her pencil and completed the drawing. The fingertips finally met. In that small act, she felt something lift, not just the pain but the need to prove herself. Maybe forgiveness wasn't about letting someone back in. Maybe it was about letting herself move on. As the night deepened, her phone buzzed again, an email. Subject: Manchester studio, offer confirmation. She smiled. The decision was clear now, but not out of rebellion nor pity. This time, it was choice, pure, peaceful choice. She looked out the window one last time, whispering, "Goodbye, old life. Thank you for the lessons." The city lights flickered, almost as if the universe was listening. It had been 3 months since I arrived in Manchester. The city felt like a clean slate, its rain-slick streets, the quiet cafes tucked into corners, and the hum of trams that seemed to carry everyone's unfinished stories. I'd rented a small flat on the top floor of a red-bricked building overlooking Deansgate. It wasn't grand, but it was mine. Every brushstroke on the wall, every cup on the shelf, every sleepless night filled with new beginnings. My days were full again. Design projects poured in. Clients from around the country admired my work. For the first time, people paid for my vision, not my name, not my father's shadow. And yet, there were moments, quiet ones, when I'd find myself pausing mid-design, the pen still in my hand, as if my thoughts had wandered back to London. One evening, as I walked home through the drizzle, my phone buzzed. A message. I almost ignored it until I saw the name. Dad. I froze under the faint glow of a streetlight. The rain hit the pavement softly, like static in the background of my thoughts. "Eliza, I know I don't deserve your time, but if you could spare one evening, I'd like to see you. There's something I need to say." I stared at the words until they blurred. For a moment, my chest felt heavy, not with anger, but something stranger. Fear, maybe, or longing. Because after everything that had happened, part of me still wanted to hear his voice. That night, I couldn't sleep. The rain tapped against my window, and I found myself replaying the last conversation we had. That morning at the train station, his hand outstretched, my eyes refusing to meet his. He'd let me go, finally, and yet here he was again. By morning, I'd made my choice. I would see him. Not to rekindle what was broken, but to understand it, properly, this time. When I arrived in London 2 days later, the air felt heavier, older. Everything was familiar, yet changed. The once bustling office where my father's company had thrived now stood empty, its logo gone, windows bare. And there he was, sitting inside a small rented workspace across the street, the same man who once commanded boardrooms, now surrounded by silence and half-empty folders. He looked up as I entered. For a second, neither of us spoke. His hair was grayer, his hands trembled slightly as he stood. "Eliza," he said softly, "you came." I did. My voice didn't shake, not like before. I'd learned how to hold my ground. He gestured for me to sit. "You look different, happier." "I am," I said simply. A faint smile crossed his face. "Good, you deserve that." For a while, the silence between us wasn't cruel, just honest. He poured tea, and I noticed how his hands shook as he lifted the cup. This was the man who once called my dreams pointless. And now, the only thing left between us was humility. I made mistakes, he began. Big ones. I thought success came from control, from order, but all I built, it collapsed because I couldn't see past my own pride. He paused, his eyes wet. And I hurt you in the process, I see that now. His words didn't hit me like thunder. They landed quietly, like truth finally finding a home. I used to think I needed your approval, I said, that without it I'd always be less. He looked up, eyes trembling. But now I realize I never needed you to believe in me. I just needed to believe in myself. He nodded slowly, the corners of his lips tightening, half in sorrow, half in relief. That's what I hoped you'd say one day. Something softened in me then, not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding. As I left his office later, I passed by the old building where I'd once waited for him as a child, watching him step out of his car, confident and unreachable. Now he stood by the door, watching me walk away, the roles reversed, the story rewritten. But as I reached the end of the street, my phone buzzed again. Another message. Eliza, there's one more thing. It's about your mother. My heart clenched. Mum had died when I was 12. Her memory was the only thing that had ever softened him, the only photograph still on his desk. I turned back. He was still there, waiting. Come back tomorrow, he said quietly. There's something I should have told you years ago. And suddenly, every part of me that had learned to move on froze. That night in my hotel room, I couldn't rest. The city outside felt louder than usual, taxis, footsteps, the faint hum of rain returning to London streets. I opened my laptop, trying to distract myself with design drafts, but the shapes blurred into memories. Mum's laughter in the garden, Dad's stern face at the dinner table, the silence that had filled our house after she was gone. What could he possibly need to tell me now? Why now, when I'd finally learned to breathe without that past pressing on my chest? I scrolled through the photos on my phone, the new ones from Manchester. My studio, the skyline at dusk, the friends I'd made. All reminders that I'd built a life, one that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. And yet, the next morning, I was back outside that small office again. He looked exhausted, but there was a calm in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. He handed me an old brown envelope. This belonged to your mother, he said. I couldn't face it after she passed, but it's time you saw it. Inside were letters, her handwriting neat and familiar. Each one dated months before she died. Each one addressed to me. My fingers trembled as I unfolded the first one. My dearest Eliza, if you're reading this, it means your father finally found the courage to let you have them. I want you to remember something. Your kindness is not weakness. The world will try to make you choose between love and pride. Choose neither. Choose peace. I stopped reading halfway, the tears finally breaking through. He watched quietly, eyes glistening too. I should have given them to you long ago, he whispered. But I wasn't ready. I thought hiding her words would help us both forget. I was wrong. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The anger, the resentment, all the weight I'd carried for years began to loosen. Because sometimes, closure doesn't come from confrontation. It comes from finally hearing the truth that was always meant for you. I looked at him, this man who had once been untouchable, and for the first time, I saw not a father or a businessman, but a person trying to make peace with his mistakes. Thank you, I said softly. He nodded, unable to speak. As I left London again that evening, the city seemed gentler. Not because it had changed, but because I had. The train hummed beneath me, carrying me back to Manchester, back to the life I'd built and the peace I'd earned. Outside, the skyline blurred into gold and gray. In my lap, one of Mum's letters rested open, her final words reminding me that sometimes redemption doesn't arrive like a storm. It arrives quietly, in understanding, in forgiveness, in love that outlasts the pain. The invitation that reopened old wounds. The chill of Manchester air swept across the glass walls of Eliza Morgan's new office, a place that smelled of success, steel, and survival. They now called her the architect of renewal, the woman who turned ruins into rebirth. The irony wasn't lost on her. The same girl who once stared at cracked ceilings and unpaid bills was now being paid to rebuild entire city blocks. Her sketches weren't just blueprints, they were testaments of everything she had fought through. Eliza had become the symbol of what perseverance could look like, quiet, poised, and untouchable. Or so everyone thought. That illusion began to tremble one Thursday evening, when her assistant, Mia, walked in holding a cream-colored envelope sealed with gold wax. "This just arrived, Ms. Morgan, hand-delivered." Eliza barely looked up from her laptop. "Another charity gala?" she asked, half distracted. Mia hesitated. "Not exactly, it's from the Caldwell Group." Eliza froze. That name, Caldwell, hit her like a sound she hadn't heard in years but could never forget. Because once, that name had meant everything. The Caldwells had been her family's closest friends, until the night they were. With trembling fingers, she opened the letter. "You are cordially invited to the annual Business Restoration Summit, hosted by Caldwell Industries." At the bottom, a signature. Jonathan Caldwell. Her heart skipped. Jonathan, the man who had once watched her father lose everything and still smiled through the boardroom glass. The man whose empire rose on the ashes of her family's downfall. And now he was inviting her to speak, to share her success story. Eliza leaned back in her chair, eyes fixed on the letter as if it were some cruel joke from the universe. She'd spent years outrunning that shadow, the whispers, the betrayal, the pity. And now, the ghosts were knocking again politely, with an embossed invitation. Mia broke the silence. "Should I decline it?" Eliza's voice came slow, deliberate. "No, we'll attend." Mia blinked, surprised. "Are you sure, the Caldwells?" "I said we'll attend," Eliza repeated. Her tone was calm, but her pulse told another story. That night, as the city glowed beneath her penthouse window, Eliza stood staring at her reflection, half woman, half memory. The same eyes that once cried in silence now looked sharp enough to cut glass. But behind that strength, a flicker of something unresolved. She walked to her desk and opened an old drawer, one she hadn't touched in years. Inside lay a single photograph. Her father, smiling beside a construction site that bore the Caldwell logo. Beneath it, a handwritten note from him. "Don't let them decide who you become, Eliza." Her fingers brushed the paper, fragile from age. 1,000 memories came rushing back. Her father's laughter, the lawsuit that took everything, the sleepless nights spent rebuilding a life from dust. And then she whispered to herself, "Maybe it's time I decide what comes next." Days turned into weeks. The closer the summit came, the more restless she grew. Every media outlet was buzzing about her attendance, the prodigal architect returning to face the industry that once dismissed her. Eliza handled it with her signature calm, but inside, something was shifting. This wasn't just business anymore. This was reckoning. The night of the summit arrived. The hall shimmered with gold light, and the sound of champagne glasses echoed across polished marble floors. Eliza entered, dressed in a black silk gown, elegance carved into silence. The crowd parted, eyes following her with awe and curiosity. And then she saw him. Jonathan Caldwell, older now, grayer, but still wearing that same measured smile. He raised his glass slightly as their eyes met, like a man greeting an equal. "Ms. Morgan," he said as she approached, "it's been a long time." Eliza smiled, calm and steady, long enough for the world to change. He chuckled. "Indeed, I must say your rise has been inspiring, almost poetic." Her gaze held his. "Poetry often comes from pain, Mr. Caldwell. Some just pretend not to notice." For a brief second, his smile faltered. When it was her turn to speak, The room fell silent. Eliza took the stage, her presence commanding yet effortless. 5 years ago, she began, I stood in a room not unlike this one, except that time I was being told my career was over, that my father's legacy was gone, that failure would define me. A pause. Every eye in the hall stayed fixed on her. But here's what I learned, she continued, voice steady but piercing. Sometimes, what breaks you is exactly what builds you. And the people who watch you fall never expect to see you rise higher than they ever dared. The applause started slow, then roared. Jonathan Caldwell's expression, unreadable. But Eliza knew. This wasn't revenge. This was closure, or the beginning of it. Because when she walked off that stage, her phone buzzed with a message that changed everything. Unknown number. You think you know the truth, Eliza, but your father's story isn't over. The night everything fell apart. The moment those words left Thomas's mouth, something inside me shifted. For weeks, I had told myself I'd moved on, that I didn't care about my father's world anymore. But that single sentence cracked the wall I'd built around my heart. I turned to Thomas, my company's senior accountant and one of the few people I trusted. What do you mean? I asked, my voice sharper than intended. He hesitated, lowering his eyes. Eliza, I've seen the Caldwell files. Your father's bankruptcy, it wasn't as clean as it looked. The air in my office suddenly felt heavier. Rain was hammering against the glass, echoing like a heartbeat. You're saying he didn't lose it all because of the market? I whispered. Thomas shook his head slowly. No, someone made sure he would. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window of my Manchester flat, the city lights flickering below like restless thoughts. For years, I had accepted the story. My father's bad investments, his arrogance, his downfall. But now, the possibility that someone else had engineered his ruin. It brought back every memory I had buried. The shouting, the disappointment, the day I packed my bags and left London for good. I thought of him, sitting in that small rented house, once proud, now hollow-eyed. Had he really been a victim? Or was this another trick, one last attempt to pull me back into his mess? The next morning, I found an old drive buried deep in my email archives, a company backup I hadn't opened in years. It was marked Caldwell Confidential. I hesitated. My hands trembled slightly as I clicked it open. Dozens of folders appeared, filled with reports, contracts, and encrypted messages. One name caught my eye, Richard Halden. Richard, my father's former partner. The man who had vanished right before the bankruptcy, taking most of the company's investors with him. I remembered him clearly. Charming, well-spoken, always with a glass of scotch in hand, and a smile that never reached his eyes. As I scrolled through the files, I found a string of messages dated just weeks before everything collapsed. One line froze me. If the board signs without reviewing the asset clause, Thomas will be forced out, and Caldwell Holdings becomes ours. My pulse quickened. They weren't talking about market losses. They were planning it. They had set him up. I called Thomas again, my voice unsteady. Thomas, did you know about this clause? He sighed heavily. I suspected, but I couldn't prove it back then. I left before the fire started. But Eliza, if you've got those files, then you've got proof. I leaned back, staring at the city skyline. So my father didn't destroy his company. They did. He nodded. Looks that way. For the first time in years, I felt something strange, not anger, not pity, but a sense of unfinished truth. All the years I'd spent resenting him, believing he'd chosen pride over love. What if he'd simply lost control of a world too cruel for honesty? That evening, I printed one of the emails and stared at it under my desk lamp. The words blurred behind a thin film of tears. I'd told myself I didn't care what happened to him, but now, knowing the truth, I felt that old ache return, the ache of a daughter who never got to say, "I'm proud of you." My phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. Unknown. Still chasing ghosts, Eliza. Some things are better left buried. My heart dropped. Whoever sent that knew what I'd found. Another message followed. Meet me tomorrow at the old pier, 7 p.m. alone. I stared at the screen, every instinct screaming not to go. But curiosity and something deeper, perhaps forgiveness, pulled me in. I needed answers. The next evening, the pier was almost deserted. Waves slapped against the wooden posts, and the smell of salt hung thick in the air. I wrapped my coat tighter and waited under the faint glow of a streetlight. Minutes passed, then I heard footsteps. From the shadows emerged a figure, tall, familiar, and older now. Richard Halden. "Eliza," he said softly, his voice still carrying that false warmth. "I wondered when you'd start digging again." I stared at him. "You ruined him. You made him believe he failed." He smiled faintly. "Your father failed himself. I just accelerated the inevitable." "Why?" I demanded. Richard stepped closer. The light caught his face, sharp lines, calculating eyes. "Because he was weak. He refused to play dirty. In business, purity doesn't survive, Eliza. You of all people should know that by now." I clenched my fists. "You destroyed a man who trusted you." He tilted his head. "And yet, you rebuilt his ashes into something greater. Maybe I did you a favor." My breath hitched. For a moment, I wanted to slap him, to make him feel the years of pain, the loneliness, the humiliation. But instead, I whispered, "You'll answer for this." He smiled, a cold, knowing smile. "Then I suppose we'll see which Caldwell survives longer, the one who drowned, or the one who learned to swim." When I got home that night, I couldn't shake his words. There was truth in them, twisted but undeniable. My father had been a good man in a bad world. And somehow I'd inherited both, his heart and his ghosts. I opened my laptop and stared at the documents again. This time, I didn't feel afraid. I began drafting a report, one that could expose Richard, clear my father's name, and finally end the story that had haunted us both. But as I typed, one final email appeared in my inbox, time-stamped 5 minutes ago. It was from Dad. Subject, "Don't do it, Eliza." Body, "There are things you do know. If you expose him, you'll expose me too." The cursor blinked at the end of the message like a heartbeat, steady, relentless. I froze. The room went silent. And just like that, the story I thought I knew unraveled once more. The truth beneath the ruins. The message from Dad sat on my screen like a ghost, simple, calm, and terrifying. "Don't do it, Eliza. There are things you do know. If you expose him, you'll expose me too." For a long moment, I didn't move. My hands hovered above the keyboard, my breath shallow. Outside, Manchester's skyline shimmered beneath a faint drizzle, a city alive with second chances. But inside my flat, it felt like time had frozen again. I thought of all the nights I'd spent building my independence, piece by piece. All the times I'd promised myself I would never go back. And yet, one message, just one, had undone everything. By morning, I couldn't bear the silence anymore. I packed my laptop and caught the early train to London. The journey felt like traveling back through time, from the woman I'd become to the girl I used to be. When I reached my father's house, the air smelled of dust and old wood. The same house that once echoed with Sunday laughter now felt smaller, quieter. He opened the door himself. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He looked older, thinner around the face, hair completely gray, but his eyes, they were the same. The kind of eyes that had once told me I could conquer the world before they learned how to look away. "Eliza," he said softly, "I was wondering when you'd come." I stepped inside. "You sent me that message." He nodded. "I did." We sat across from each other in the small living room. The silence between us was thick, like two people standing on opposite sides of a bridge that might collapse if either moved too fast. "Dad," I began, "I know about Halden. I know he set you up. But what did you mean you'll expose me too?" He closed his eyes for a long time before answering. "Because, love, he didn't do it alone." My stomach dropped. You helped him." He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached for an old folder from the coffee table, the same kind of folder I used to see him carry when I was a child, full of blueprints and boardroom dreams. Inside were papers, contracts, bank statements, names. "I was in over my head," he said finally. "Richard promised he'd keep the company afloat if I signed one document, just one. I thought I was saving everything, our reputation, your future, but I was signing away the firm." I stared at him. "All those years you told me I didn't understand business, and it was you who didn't read the fine print." He winced but didn't argue. "You're right, I was proud, too proud to admit I'd been played. And when it all fell apart, I let everyone think I was the villain. It was easier than facing what I'd done." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The truth wasn't clean. It never is. He wasn't innocent, but he wasn't cruel either. He was human. Broken, flawed, and desperate to keep a world he'd already lost. "So you knew," I whispered. "All this time, you knew it was partly your fault and you let me hate you for it." He looked up, eyes glistening. "I thought if you hated me, you'd keep going, that you'd build something better, something untouched by my mistakes." I wanted to scream, to tell him how unfair that was, but part of me understood painfully, deeply. He'd chosen to be the villain in my story, just so I could be the hero in my own. We sat in silence for a long time after that. The rain outside grew heavier, tracing patterns down the window. He poured 2 cups of tea, one for me, one for himself, like we used to do when I was little. "Dad," I said finally, "you could have told me the truth." He smiled faintly, "And risk losing the only thing I had left, your respect." There was no bitterness in his voice, just quiet exhaustion. I looked at him then, really looked. The man who'd built empires and lost them, who tried to raise a daughter and protect her by lying to her. For the first time, I didn't see a failure. I saw someone who had carried too much for too long. I took out the printed email, the one that could expose everything. "I can still publish this," I said. He nodded. "You can, and if you do, I'll stand by it. But before you decide, there's something else you should know." He handed me another envelope, sealed, old, and marked with my name in his handwriting. "What's this?" "Something I wrote the night I lost the company. I never sent it." I opened it carefully. Inside was a letter, dated December 17th, 2019, the day everything collapsed. My hands trembled as I read. "My dearest Eliza, if you're reading this, then I've failed in every way a father can. I wanted you to grow, without the burden of my mistakes. I know I've been hard on you, dismissive even, but it wasn't pride, it was fear. Fear that the world would never value your art the way I did, even when I couldn't show it. I wanted to protect you from disappointment. Instead, I became it." By the time I reached the end, the ink had blurred with tears. I looked up at him. He wasn't watching me. He was staring at the fire, lost in thought. I folded the letter slowly. "Maybe the world did end that night," I said quietly. "But maybe this is what comes after, not ruin, but rebuilding." He smiled faintly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then maybe we both get a second chance." The rain had stopped. A faint light broke through the clouds outside, falling softly across his face. For the first time in years, I saw peace there. Still, something inside me whispered that the story wasn't over. There were too many missing pieces, too many shadows behind the truth. Because if my father wasn't the only one who signed those papers, who else knew what really happened that night? The night air was cold, sharp, and almost prophetic. London's skyline shimmered with glass and ghosts, the ghosts of ambition, betrayal, and broken dreams. Eliza stood near the edge of the old pier, where fog rolled across the Thames like secrets refusing to rest. A man's voice broke through the silence. "Still drawn to the water, huh?" She turned sharply. For a heartbeat, she didn't believe her eyes. Nathan Hale. Once her mentor. Once the man who had vanished when her family's company crumbled under false accusations. He looked older now, the kind of older that comes not from years, but from guilt. His coat was worn, his eyes hollow, but still sharp enough to cut through the dark. Eliza, you shouldn't be here. Nathan, neither should you, but here we are both haunted by the same ghosts. A tense silence settled between them, heavy with unspoken years. Eliza, you disappeared when we needed you most. You could have stopped everything. Nathan, you think I didn't try? I was silenced, Eliza, blacklisted. Someone made sure the truth never reached daylight. Eliza's jaw tightened. Sophie Caldwell, she whispered, as if nomming the devil herself. Nathan shook his head. Sophie was the spark, but not the fire. She didn't have that kind of reach. Someone higher up wanted your family gone, and I have proof. He handed her a small black USB drive. Nathan, your father wasn't the villain they painted him to be. He uncovered something inside Caldwell Industries, something that threatened more than just their reputation. Eliza's pulse quickened. What was it? Nathan's expression darkened. A shadow fund, millions siphoned from government contracts into private offshore accounts. Your father found the files, tried to expose them, and that's when they framed him. The revelation hit like thunder. The pieces began to align: Sophie's father's sudden promotion, the media smear campaign, the false documents, all orchestrated. Eliza, so Sophie's betrayal wasn't just personal, it was part of a cover-up. Nathan, exactly, she was their pawn, but she doesn't even know it. Eliza's breath trembled. For so long, her revenge had been aimed at Sophie, but now the scope widened. This wasn't just about one betrayal. This was a web of corruption. Nathan leaned closer. You have one chance to bring this all down, but you'll need help, real help. Eliza met his gaze. And you expect me to trust you after you vanished? Nathan sighed. No, I expect you to use me, the same way I used to use the truth. Something inside her shifted. A cold clarity, the kind that comes when anger finally finds direction. She pocketed the USB drive, her voice steady. Eliza, then let's finish what my father started. The following morning, Eliza sat in her apartment, laptop glowing with the files Nathan had given her. The documents were encrypted, buried behind layers of digital walls. But she wasn't the naive intern she once was. She had learned, evolved, hardened. Hours passed, lines of code blurred. Then, a click. A file opened. Project Meridian. Her eyes widened as spreadsheets, payment trails, and falsified government records flooded the screen. Caldwell Industries wasn't just corrupt. It was complicit in manipulating infrastructure bids, exploiting loopholes, and silencing whistleblowers. Her father had tried to expose them. They destroyed him for it. Tears burned in her eyes, not of weakness, but of long-awaited truth. Every sleepless night, every humiliation, every whispered insult she endured had led to this moment. Then her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You've seen too much. Stop now or you'll regret it. Her hand tightened around the phone. Fear flickered, then died. She typed back. Too late. I already regret not starting sooner. That night, she met Nathan again, this time in a dimly lit parking lot under a flickering street lamp. Eliza, they know I've accessed the files. Nathan, then they'll come for both of us. We have to move fast. He handed her a folder old photographs, transaction receipts, and a name written in red ink. Damien Caldwell. Eliza froze, Sophie's father, the man who once toasted her father's downfall with champagne. Nathan, he's the one behind everything. The offshore accounts, the media manipulation, all of it. He's preparing to retire quietly. If we don't act now, the trail goes cold forever. Eliza stared at the name, the letters almost glowing with vengeance. Then we won't let him. Nathan smiled grimly. You've got your father's fire. She looked up. No, I've got my own. As they drove into the night, Eliza's reflection in the car window told its own story. No longer the broken daughter of a ruined legacy, but a woman rewriting the ending herself. The city lights blurred behind her, fading into streaks of gold and shadow. The battle was no longer about revenge. It was about restoration. Her voice, calm yet fierce, broke the silence. Tomorrow, the Caldwells fall. The city lights shimmered against the window of Eliza's office, their golden reflection washing over her desk like fatting memories. It was late, the kind of late that belonged to sleepless minds and unfinished plans. She traced a finger along the rim of her coffee cup, her thoughts caught between the woman she used to be and the one she was becoming. Nathan's message flashed on her phone. It's time. 2 words simple, but heavy with everything they'd risked for months. Eliza stood, inhaling deeply. The silence of her office felt different tonight, not comforting, but expectant. Files lay spread across her desk, blueprints of the Caldwell Empire, every crack and secret marked in red. Together, she and Nathan had pieced together what others had ignored. How the empire her father once admired had been built on deception, and how it finally destroyed him. But what haunted Eliza most wasn't what they'd uncovered. It was who had helped make it happen. Her own father. At the other end of the city, Nathan adjusted his tie, glancing into the rearview mirror. His eyes held the same calm precision that had drawn Eliza to trust him. He wasn't just her ally, he was her mirror. Someone who understood what it meant to rebuild yourself from ashes. The car door opened. Eliza slipped inside, her face half-lit by passing streetlights. For a moment, neither spoke. Their silence said more than words ever could. Finally, Nathan broke it. Once we release these documents, there's no going back. Eliza's jaw tightened. Good, I'm tired of looking back. Nathan studied her, proud but cautious. This isn't just about revenge anymore, Eliza. You're exposing an entire dynasty. People will get hurt. She met his eyes. People are already hurt. I'm just done pretending not to see it. They drove toward the old Caldwell headquarters, now eerily quiet, stripped of its former grandeur. A ghost of a kingdom, waiting to fall one last time. Inside, Nathan's laptop hummed softly as he connected to the private server. The digital heartbeat of the empire blinked to life on the screen. Once I upload this, he said, the truth becomes public, every shady deal, every cover-up, every forged audit. Eliza nodded, her fingers trembling slightly. Then let's make it count. She clicked send. The progress bar filled slowly, painfully, as if time itself hesitated to witness what they were about to do. When it reached 100%, Eliza exhaled. It was done. The truth was free. But before she could speak, her phone buzzed again. A new message. Unknown number. You think you've won. You have no idea what your father sacrificed for you. The blood drained from her face. Nathan caught her reaction instantly. Who's it from? I don't know, she whispered, but whoever it is, they know too much. Nathan leaned forward. Could it be Caldwell himself, or... Eliza cut him off. He's gone. The company's gone. Whoever this is, they're connected. The message came again. Check the archive folder. File marked Carter Trust. You'll see who really paid the price. Her heart thudded. Carter, her name. Nathan opened the server again. There it was, a locked folder, hidden beneath layers of encrypted data. Do you want to see it? He asked. Eliza hesitated. Part of her wanted to walk away, to leave the ghosts buried, but she couldn't, not anymore. Open it. Inside were documents, bank transfers, letters, all connected to her father's final months at Caldwell Holdings. And one file stood out. Eliza, Settlement Confidential. As Nathan clicked it open, the screen filled with scanned pages. Her father's signature. Her own name. And beneath it, a clause, one that changed everything. It revealed that her father had secretly sold his remaining company shares to secure her freedom. He had taken the fall for a fraud he didn't fully commit, to protect her name from being tied to the scandal. Eliza froze. The world seemed to tilt. Nathan's voice softened. He did this for you. Her chest tightened as tears pricked the corners of her eyes. All this time, I thought he was selfish, that he destroyed everything out of pride. She sank into the chair, staring blankly at the glowing screen. But he was saving me. Nathan knelt beside her, voice steady but gentle. Then maybe this isn't about revenge anymore, Eliza. Maybe it's about finishing what he started the right way. Eliza wiped her eyes, struggling between gratitude and guilt. He lied to me, Nathan. My whole life he made me feel small, worthless, and now I find out he was protecting me. Nathan sighed. People protect in broken ways. Maybe he didn't know how to love you the way you needed, but he tried. The room fell silent again. Outside, thunder rolled through the city. The storm that had been building all night finally began to break. Hours later, Eliza stood alone by the window, watching the rain blur the skyline. Her reflection stared back, tired, uncertain, but no longer afraid. She whispered, as if speaking to her father's memory. I understand now, but that doesn't erase the pain you caused. Behind her, Nathan's voice broke the silence. The press has picked up the story. Caldwell Holdings is officially under investigation. You did it. Eliza nodded slowly. No, she said quietly. We did it, but I'm not sure it feels like victory. Nathan stepped closer, his tone softer. Then maybe victory was never the goal. As the night deepened, Eliza opened her laptop once more. The anonymous number had sent another message, just one line this time. If you want the full truth, meet me where it all began. Attached was a location, Carter Manor, the old family estate outside London. A place she hadn't seen in years. A place her father once called home. Eliza stared at the screen, her heart pounding. Who was this person, and what else did they know? She turned to Nathan. I'm going back, she said firmly. To where it started. Nathan frowned. Eliza, that could be a trap. Maybe, she replied, but so was my whole life, and I survived that. Carter Manor, shadows of the past. The drive to Carter Manor felt surreal. Manchester faded behind her, replaced by rolling fields and the familiar curves of the countryside. Rain had passed, leaving the air fresh, almost fragrant, yet heavy with memory. Every bend in the road, every tree reminded Eliza of childhood summers, of laughter echoing through the halls, of a world she had once thought safe. Now, that same house held secrets she could no longer ignore. She parked at the long, gravel driveway. The estate loomed like a sentinel, imposing, silent, and slightly weathered by time. Windows glinted under the morning sun, reflecting clouds that seemed to carry whispers from the past. Eliza stepped out of the car, her coat hugging her tightly. She felt exposed, vulnerable, yet strangely determined. Every step toward the front door was a confrontation with herself. The girl who had left, the woman who had returned, and the daughter who now carried her father's legacy on her shoulders. The door creaked as she pushed it open. Dust hung in the air, motes dancing in shafts of light. The house smelled of old wood and forgotten memories, of varnish and lost time. Eliza, hello, her voice echoed softly. Silence. She wandered through the main hall, her fingers brushing against the banister. Portraits of her ancestors lined the walls, stern faces frozen in oil, their eyes seeming to follow her. Her father's portrait hung at the top of the staircase, his gaze softer than she remembered, almost pleading. A drawer in the console table caught her eye. She opened it and found a small envelope, yellowed with age. Her father's handwriting curled across the front. For Eliza. Hands trembling, she tore it open. Inside was a letter, thick with emotion. Eliza, if you're reading this, then you've begun to uncover what I could not say aloud. I've spent my life trying to protect you and failing in ways I never imagined. There are truths about our family, about Caldwell Holdings, and about me that you must know before you make any final decisions. You are stronger than I was. You must face this alone. Trust no one entirely. Even those who seem loyal may have shadows of their own. Love, always, Dad. Her breath caught. This was more than a letter. It was a map, a warning, and a confession all at once. Eliza turned and noticed a familiar silhouette emerging from the hallway. Nathan. Nathan, you found it. Eliza, he's left me a puzzle, and I think it's bigger than I imagined." Nathan nodded. "We've known the surface truth. Now it's time for the roots." Together, they began exploring the manor. Rooms long locked creaked open under their touch, revealing stacks of papers, boxes of old ledgers, and photographs hidden in envelopes. Every discovery hinted at decisions, mistakes, and sacrifices made years before Eliza was born. In one study, she found something unexpected, a ledger marked with her father's careful handwriting. Its pages documented financial transactions, legal, but unusually protective. Large sums moved to her name, accounts set up under layers of secrecy, every number calculated to shield her from ruin. Eliza realized with a sudden, sharp clarity. Her father had planned for her independence, even if it meant sacrificing his own reputation. Hours passed, and the day gave way to evening. Outside, the sun dipped low, casting the manor in shades of amber and shadow. Nathan held up a photograph he had found tucked into the ledger. It was of her father with a woman Eliza did not recognize, sharp-featured, poised, her eyes hinting at secrets. "Nathan, who is she?" Eliza studied the image. Something about her seemed familiar, a resemblance to her mother, perhaps, but sharper, older. She flipped the photo over and found a date, 2008. "That's when the first shadow appeared," Nathan murmured. "Before Caldwell Holdings collapsed, she's connected to the offshore accounts." Eliza swallowed hard. So someone close to Dad orchestrated part of the downfall. Nathan nodded. Not entirely, but close enough that he couldn't fight them openly. That's why he left clues for you and hid the ledger. He wanted the next generation to finish what he started. That night, Eliza sat alone in the drawing room, the fireplace casting long shadows across the walls. Her father's letters, photographs, and ledgers surrounded her like a shrine of truth. For the first time, she felt the weight of both her father's love and his mistakes. His protection had been imperfect, secretive, even painful, but it had been unwavering. Her phone buzzed again, another anonymous message. "Look under the floorboards in the library. You'll find what you need." Heart racing, she moved to the library. Dust swirled as she lifted the worn carpet, revealing a loose floorboard. Beneath it was a small metal box. Inside, she found documents, legal papers, and another letter from her father, this one more urgent. "Eliza, if you are reading this, then time is critical. I never trusted Sophie fully, but circumstances forced her hand. You must decide whether to confront her now or risk losing the final piece of the truth." Eliza's pulse thundered in her ears. Sophie, always the shadow in her journey. She had thought revenge, exposure, and justice were separate paths. Now she realized they intertwined. Sophie was part of the story, and she was no longer just a bystander. Nathan approached quietly. "Are you ready?" Eliza clenched the papers in her hand. "I have to be. This isn't just about exposing the Caldwells anymore. It's about understanding why my father fell, who he trusted, and what it cost him to protect me." Nathan's gaze softened. "Whatever happens next, you're not alone, but you'll have to face Sophie yourself." The air outside the manor shifted. The wind carried the faintest echo of laughter from years past, a reminder of innocence lost and lessons earned. Eliza's voice barely rose above a whisper. "Then I'll face her, and I'll finally uncover everything." The night deepened. Carter Manor, silent and watchful, seemed to hold its breath, a fortress guarding secrets, waiting for the reckoning. Eliza looked at Nathan, then at the files, then out toward the empty grounds where shadows pooled. Her journey had brought her full circle, back to the home she had fled, to the father she had misunderstood, and to the truths that had been hidden in plain sight. And yet one thought lingered. Not all debts were financial. Some were emotional, some were moral, and some could change everything she had built. Facing Sophie, shadows and truths. Eliza drove through the outskirts of London, the city lights fading behind her as the countryside stretched ahead. Carter Manor had offered answers, yes, but now there was one question that burned hotter than any ledger letter or hidden folder. Sophie. She gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white. Her mind raced through every memory, every slight, every conversation that had led to this moment. Sophie Caldwell, once a colleague, a rival, and the woman who had orchestrated so much chaos in their intertwined lives. And now she would confront her. The manor loomed ahead, silent and imposing in the twilight. The air was thick with expectation. Every step toward the entrance echoed the heavy weight of truth. Eliza's heart hammered, not with fear, but with the kind of adrenaline born from years of suppressed anger, curiosity, and a relentless drive for justice. Inside, Sophie waited. The room was stark, modern, yet eerily cold, reflecting her composure perfectly. She rose as Eliza entered, her posture elegant, controlled, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of tension. "Sophie, I wondered when you'd arrive." "Eliza, it's taken me a long time to understand, but here I am, and we need to talk." Sophie's lips curved into a small, tight smile. "About the company." Eliza shook her head. "About everything, about our fathers, about the lies that ruined lives, about what really happened that night." Sophie's gaze softened for just a moment. "I didn't want this, you know. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I followed orders. I believed I was doing the right thing for my family." Eliza studied her. The words were half truth, half shield, and yet there was vulnerability there, a crack in the armor Sophie had always worn. "Eliza, your orders cost my father everything, and for a long time I believed you did it out of malice. But maybe you were just trapped in the same shadows he was." The room fell silent. The only sound was the faint ticking of an old clock. Eliza's mind replayed the moments, the betrayals, the years of anger. And yet now, standing here, she felt something unexpected, not hatred, but a complex mix of understanding, sorrow, and cautious compassion. "Sophie, your father, he was never my enemy. I was following a path I thought was inevitable. I didn't see the whole picture until it was too late." Eliza's eyes narrowed. "Then help me now. Show me the truth that even he couldn't reveal. Show me everything about the shadow fund, the offshore accounts, and why it all collapsed." Sophie nodded slowly, retrieving a thin folder from the desk. "I have what you need, but understand this, exposing it will change everything. Not just for our families, but for everyone who was involved." Eliza took the folder, her fingers brushing against Sophie's. A silent acknowledgement passed between them, two women, linked by betrayal, loss, and now a fragile emerging alliance. They sat together, going through the documents. Every page unraveled the web that had trapped both families for years. Shell companies, falsified audits, blackmail letters, the complexity was staggering. "Sophie, your father knew some of this, but not all. I tried to shield him from the worst parts, thinking I could fix it alone. I failed." Eliza's voice was quiet but firm. "So did he, but we're not going to fail. Not now, not anymore." Nathan, who had accompanied her quietly, nodded from the corner. He had seen betrayal, exposure, and pain before, but he had never seen a moment like this. Two women, once adversaries, now facing the full weight of truth together. Hours passed. Night descended outside, casting the room in shadows. Eliza leaned back, exhausted yet determined. "Eliza, this is bigger than revenge. It's justice. It's rebuilding everything they tried to destroy." Sophie's voice was soft. "And if we succeed, what happens to us?" Eliza looked at her, a mixture of resolve and empathy in her eyes. "We survive, we rebuild, and maybe we forgive in our own way." Sophie nodded, understanding the weight behind her words. Forgiveness wasn't about forgetting, it was about choosing the path forward. Suddenly, a phone buzzed. Eliza glanced at it, a message from an unknown number, terse and urgent. "He knows you're there, be careful." Eliza's heart raced. Nathan's hand rested lightly on her shoulder. "We anticipated this," he said calmly, "but it means we're close. The final pieces are within reach." Sophie's eyes widened. Who knows?" Eliza didn't answer immediately. She stared at the folder in her hands. Damien Caldwell, the patriarch, the orchestrator of decades of manipulation. "Eliza, it's him. He knows we've uncovered everything, and he won't stop until he either controls the narrative or destroys it." The room grew colder, as if the walls themselves sensed the storm about to break. Eliza's hands tightened around the documents. Eliza, then we act tonight, no hesitation, no fear. Nathan nodded. We've planned for this. The press, the lawyers, the financial auditors, all ready, all waiting. When we release the evidence, it will be irreversible. Sophie swallowed, the weight of her choices pressing down on her. And if he comes after us personally? Eliza's voice was unwavering. Then we stand, together, for the truth, for our families, for every life he tried to control. A sudden flash of lightning illuminated the manor. The wind rattled the windows, and for a heartbeat, the past and present collided, the ghosts of betrayal, anger, and sorrow blending with the possibility of redemption. Eliza stood, walking toward the window, gazing at the city lights far below. Her reflection merged with the storm outside. She whispered softly, almost to herself. Eliza, this is it, the reckoning, the moment everything changes. Nathan stepped beside her. Are you ready? Eliza turned to Sophie, then back to the storm-lit city. Her chest rose and fell steadily, her mind clear, her resolve absolute. Eliza, I've never been more ready. The storm outside intensified, the thunder echoing like the drums of destiny. Inside Carter Manor, the final act of truth, justice, and redemption was about to begin. The reckoning, Damien Caldwell. The night was heavy with rain, the manor's silhouette cut sharply against the storm-laden sky. Carter Manor had become both battlefield and confessional, every creaking floorboard echoing the tension that pulsed through its walls. Eliza, Sophie, and Nathan stood together, their breaths shallow, their minds sharp with anticipation. In the grand hall, the front doors burst open. Damien Caldwell entered, his presence commanding, like a shadow that had never truly left. Rain dripped from his coat, his eyes cold, calculating, yet there was a flicker of recognition in them, surprise, even respect. Damien, so the children have grown up, and finally they think they can play with fire. Eliza stepped forward, her voice steady, unwavering. Eliza, this isn't a game, Damien. It's the truth. Every scheme, every lie, every life you ruined, it ends tonight. Damien's lips curled into a smile, amused, unshaken. Damien, the truth, my dear girl, truth is subjective. Power decides reality, and I still hold the power here. Nathan's hand rested on Eliza's shoulder, calm, grounded. Nathan, not anymore. Eliza pulled out the folders, the USB drives, evidence compiled meticulously over months. Every offshore account, falsified document, and fraudulent transaction was laid bare. The flicker of lights across the polished wood of the hall reflected the weight of her resolve. Eliza, we've made it public. The authorities have copies. The media has copies. Your empire of lies is over. For a moment, Damien's eyes narrowed, a dangerous gleam cutting through his composed exterior. Damien, do you know what you've just done? This will destroy more than me. Careers, reputations, livelihoods. Eliza's gaze hardened. Eliza, collateral damage is a word you've used far too lightly in your life. Now it's your turn to face it. Sophie stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. Sophie, and don't forget, Damien, even those you trusted blindly could betray you. I was part of your plan, yes, but I've chosen differently now. Damien's eyes flicked to Sophie, then back to Eliza. Damien, so the two of you think you can rewrite history. You think a few documents, a few revelations, can undo decades of influence. Eliza's voice was low, steady, filled with the weight of her journey. Eliza, we're not rewriting history, we're exposing it. And the difference is truth. Truth has power you can never control. The storm outside intensified. Thunder rumbled like a drumbeat, echoing the pulse of confrontation within the manor. Damien took a slow step forward, a mixture of anger and admiration in his eyes. Damien, your father, he never understood the game, did he? Eliza's jaw tightened. Eliza, he understood more than you ever knew. He tried to fight in his own way to protect me, even when it meant sacrificing everything. Damien's gaze flickered with something unspoken: regret, remorse, or simply recognition of her strength. Eliza continued, her voice rising slightly with the momentum of her conviction. Eliza, he may have lost battles, Damien, but he taught me how to win them. And this is my victory. Not over him, not even over you, but over the silence, the lies, and the fear that has haunted our families for years. Nathan stepped closer to Eliza, a silent pillar of support. Together, they presented the documents, every detail cross-referenced, every shadow illuminated. Damien's composure wavered for the first time. Hours passed as the confrontation unfolded: arguments, explanations, confessions. Damien tried to negotiate, to manipulate, to threaten, but Eliza remained resolute. Sophie, once a reluctant participant in deceit, stood firm alongside her. Sophie, Damien, it ends tonight. Not with violence, not with revenge, but with the truth. Eliza watched him closely. The man who had seemed untouchable was now stripped to his core, exposed not by force, but by transparency, by the patient work of those he had underestimated. Eliza, you taught me many things, Damien, but the most important lesson: power isn't in money, influence, or fear. It's in honesty, and it's too late for you to reclaim it. Finally, Damien slumped into a chair, exhausted, defeated. There was no yelling, no dramatic outburst, just the quiet collapse of a man who realized the world he built on lies was gone. Eliza approached him, holding the last letter from her father. Eliza, this was never just about revenge. It was about understanding, redemption, and making sure no one else suffers like my family did. Damien looked up, meeting her eyes. For the first time, there was a glimmer of humility. Damien, your father, he was stronger than I realized. And you are everything he hoped you'd be. Eliza placed the letter on the table. Eliza, I hope so. But strength isn't measured in power, Damien. It's measured in how you face the truth and what you do once you see it. Outside, dawn broke. Rain had stopped, leaving a soft light over the manor. The storm had passed, leaving clarity in its wake. Eliza stepped onto the balcony, breathing in the fresh air. Nathan and Sophie joined her silently. The house, once filled with tension and shadows, now felt lighter, a sanctuary reborn, carrying the echoes of closure. Eliza, it's over. Sophie nodded. Yes, for the first time in a long time it feels right. Nathan smiled faintly. You did it, Eliza. You brought justice, truth, and redemption all at once. Eliza's gaze lingered on the horizon. She thought of her father, of the sacrifices, of the lessons hidden in every hardship. She whispered softly, Eliza, we survived, we learned, and we finally found peace. The camera of her memory lingered on the empty hall, silent, still, yet full of life's lessons. The letters, ledgers, and truth lay exposed. Damien Caldwell's empire, once untouchable, was now held accountable. And Eliza Carter, the daughter once underestimated, had completed her journey. She turned to Nathan and Sophie, a soft smile breaking through her exhaustion. Eliza, now we rebuild for ourselves, for those we lost, and for the future. The wind carried her words across the manor grounds, a quiet echo of triumph, understanding, and hard-earned redemption.